After months of won't they, it seems like Manchester United may finally be forced to admit defeat in their hunt for Frenkie de Jong. The Barcelona midfielder may be locked in negotiations to reduce his salary with the Blaugrana, but he seems unwilling to countenance a switch to the northwest, leaving Erik ten Hag scrambling for alternatives with just days until the campaign begins. United clearly need to reinforce the midfield, with Scott McTominay their most used player in the spot last year, and while fans have speculated that Christian Eriksen could fill a deeper role, another season of McFred in the engine room is a significant risk to take, especially given the signings made by rivals like Arsenal and Tottenham, and the additions at ambitious climbers like West Ham and Crystal Palace. So if they can't get Frenkie, what next? Today we're offering 3 players who could fill the hole in the middle of the park for the Red Devils, and we start with a name which will be very familiar to United fans. Sergej Milinkovic-Savic. Before we get into what SMS could bring to United, it's worth considering what prompted Ten Hag to seek a reunion with De Jong. That's not an easy task, as the midfielder hasn't quite been himself at Barcelona, but some of his game still stands out versus others in his position, and when we fold in the data from his time with Ten Hag in Amsterdam, it's clear that what he wants is a press-resistant modern CM who can sweep up in the middle but mostly is tasked with passing and running forward, maintaining offensive momentum but not scoring or creating much himself, with De Jong's single season goal and assist output peaking at 7 in 17-18. So Milinkovic-Savic may seem like an odd suggestion. After all, while the Serb is 6'3" and can often be seen powering through the middle like his Barcelona counterpart, he was hilariously productive in front of goal last term, bagging 11 goals and 10 assists in league play, and taking and generating about 3.2 shots per game to Frenkie's 2.5. But while he's recently taken up a more advanced position, Milinkovic-Savic has been shuttled around the centre of the park during his 7 seasons with Lazio, from deep midfield to second striker, and that's visible in the continued excellence of his distribution, with an excellent 5 progressive passes and 5 balls into the final third a match in 21-22. That's a reduction on previous figures which had been up in the 6 apiece range, but it's extremely impressive that SMS has managed to stay influential in approach play while getting forward more, and he's managed a similar balance when he's been fielded closer to the defence too, averaging 1.5 chances created even when featuring as a 6. Dribbling and defending wise, Sergey probably couldn't keep pace with Ajax de Jong, but Barca de Jong is firmly attainable, raising the question of what Ten Hag is recruiting for here. The midfielder he managed in Amsterdam, who hits over 3 dribbles a game, or the guy we currently see flexing between midfield and centre half for Xavi, who puts up just 0.9. At present, Sergey beats his man more often than that at 1.1 times per 90, though he does have a much lower success rate, 50% to 70%, and loses the ball more often, 4 times a game to 2.2. On the other hand, he presses more than De Jong and wins possession almost twice as often, between 3 and 4 times per 90, but even these numbers are relatively weak, in the bottom quarter of midfielders. Put simply, this is probably as good as SMS gets in these stats. Frenkie could do more. The key question here is whether Milinkovic-Savic's natural game will come into conflict with Ten Hag's demands, and at 27 it's foolish to buy him with the intention of fundamentally altering what has made him great. Well, FDJ takes 2/3 of his touches in the middle third of the pitch and just 3% in the box. SMS has historically done only half his work in the centre and has spent almost twice as much time as the 24-year-old in attacking areas. That's why he's averaged about 8 league strikes a season over the last 5 years, and with a contract until 2024 and coming off his best campaign in front of goal ever, he's sure to command a fee of at least the £60 million reported, which may not be the best use of United's resources considering that the big man wants to occupy the same areas of the field as the still brilliant Bruno Fernandes and United new boy Christian Eriksen. So, a possibility, but question marks remain. What else can we find for the Red Devils? Bryan Cristante. Another 27-year-old Serie A star is up next, and with an entirely different profile. Bryan Cristante excelled for Roma last term, missing just 4 games and playing more midfield minutes than anyone else as Jose Mourinho's side came in 6th in Italy and lifted their first European silverware in over 60 years. That wasn't the only novelty for the Giallorossi, with Cristante pressed into a new role by his coach, transforming from an 8 into an out-and-out holding player, and the change is extremely obvious in the numbers. Having previously hovered around 3 tackles and interceptions per 90, Mourinho's arrival pushed Cristante's ball winning into the stratosphere with 4.5 a game, while his pressing skyrocketed too, going from closing down an opponent every 5.5 minutes to doing so every 4 minutes and 20 seconds. That's a huge advance on De Jong's stats, with the Dutchman sinking from 3.5 defensive actions a match in his last year under Ten Hag to just 2 last season. season, and some of the worst pressing numbers of any midfielder in Europe, worse than 97 players out of 100. If United want someone to replace Fred's work in the middle third, Cristante is the better candidate. Of course, doing more off the ball came with a cost. Cristante lost a chunk of his running with the ball. Formerly an excellent dribbler with 2 per 90 and as many as 7 progressive carries, the Italian was motoring forward in possession as often as Mateo Kovacic or Declan Rice, and now those figures have dropped to the 5 per 90 of Jorginho/Bruno Guimaraes range. Not bad by any means, but a good demonstration of Mourinho's preference to have him sitting deep and distributing. To be fair to the special one, you only have to glance at the stats or a highlights reel to understand why. Always a useful passer since his early 20s at Atalanta, the Italian ranked second in Serie A last year for passes into the final third with an unbelievable 7.5 per 90, the same as Manchester City's Rodri. And while he's less accurate than De Jong, with 82% success, a 10% downgrade on the younger man, he's also more aggressive, sending 37% of his passes forward to De Jong's 23%, and actually getting on the ball more often. To add to United's confidence here, he's also frequently under pressure, seeing more congestion around him than 80% of others in his spot, but still loses the ball only about half as often as De Jong, and less than every United midfielder. That could mean that he's better prepared for the Prem than other options, already used to teams using aggression and physicality to disrupt his flow. It may feel like a risk recruiting from Serie A, especially from a side which barely scraped into the Europa League spots in May. But Cristante has experience abroad, having won a pair of doubles with Benfica in his youth, and he was part of Italy's 2020 European Championship triumph, boasting more caps for his nation than other highly rated Azzurri midfielders like Locatelli, Tonali and Pellegrini. Speaking Portuguese could help him mesh with Fred and Bruno too, and with a contract up in 2024, now is the time for Roma to consider a sale. Likely to be half as expensive as De Jong, he's worth a nibble. Renato Sanchez. Another totally different candidate rounds off our list. Renato Sanchez was expected to jump from Lille to Milan this summer, the Rossoneri courting the 24-year-old for much of last season. But with the window more than halfway done, the Portuguese remains in northern France, with plenty of rumoured interest from Italy and Paris Saint-Germain, but no hard offers so far. By the time you see this, that might have changed, but if Sanchez still doesn't have a new home by mid-August, United could see if a low bid could tempt Les Dogs into a sale, and FBref's data suggests the gamble could be worthwhile, rating Sanchez as one of the 10 players most similar to Frenkie across Europe's top 5 leagues. If there's one area where it's easy to see what they're getting at, it's in ball carrying. Slightly different from dribbling, carries are not when a player beats a man but simply moving with the ball at their feet. Regularly driving your team forward this way is a great skill to have, taking it into the final third or box is even better, and here Frenkie de Jong is one of the best up there, rating in the top 9% of midfielders for carries which move possession at least 5 yards upfield, and in the top 6% for carries into the final third. And Sanchez is right up there with him, in the top 4% of midfielders for forward carries, top 13% for final third entries, and then really shining when it comes to bursting into the box, with just 2% of players in his position in Europe running the ball into the area more often than him. His passing is just as strong, with Sanchez averaging 7.6 progressive passes per 90 to De Jong's 5.5, and in fact just 15 players in Europe passed into the opposition third more often than the former Bayern Munich man last season, while he also created an insane 2 chances per game from deep, and played the ball into the box as regularly as top-class attackers like Foden and Mane, or devastating midfield distributors like Toni Kroos and Luka Modric. All in all, Sanchez's only real weakness when he's on the field is his defensive output. Though at 2.3 tackles and interceptions per 90 and 15 pressures a game, he still outstrips De Jong in all areas. But this brings us to his major issue, his availability. Chronically unreliable, Sanchez should now be in his physical prime but has never managed 2,000 minutes in a season, and so United would have to expect to lose the player for a decent chunk of each campaign. But is that all that different from signing as 27-year-old Milinkovic-Savic? Despite what common wisdom says, midfielders tend to slow down significantly around age 30, meaning that a 5-year contract for a player in their late 20s will yield diminishing returns in the last couple of seasons. Would Sanchez's annual holiday on the treatment table really be so much worse? With the teams around them strengthening, United need some smart moves and big swings to go their way if they want to reclaim their spot at the Premier League's top table, and targeting players like Sanchez, with plenty years ahead of them and relatively low wages, would at least allow them to shift signings that don't work out, and prevent huge flops like Pogba and Matic cluttering up their books. The path to a better Man United will not only be through Ten Hag's coaching, but through better squad building. As they search for a new midfield anchor, we'll see just how much the club have learned from a decade in the wilderness. So those were our 3 alternatives to Frenkie de Jong at Man United, but what did you make of our selections, and do you have any picks yourself? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please leave it a like, and why not click on screen right now for another great EFD vid. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.